Good morning, everyone. It is Rollie, and welcome to a Chatting with Wisdom. And we are here on a Monday instead of a Wednesday. I will be back again on Wednesday. However, we are here today with Kori. So, Kori is a late diagnosed autistic ADHDer, life strategist for autistic and ADHD women, and a transformational purpose coach. She is currently located in Albany, New York, where she is raising a neurodivergent family. Her older daughter is non-speaking autistic and also has ADHD and anxiety, and her youngest child is HSP gifted, affectionately dubbed in the mini me. She also shares her life with her partner and 3 cats. As an empath, HSP, and highly intuitive individual, Kori brings her own life experience as an autistic woman combined with her adventures in momming, entrepreneurship, and homemaking to bring you the day-to-day of her life at home. When she's not working on or in her business, Kori enjoys watching true crime documentaries, listening to self-improvement podcasts, and rewatching Disney movies, singing along to musicals, and spending time with her family. So welcome, Kori. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Good.
Happy to be here.
So thank you so much for rescheduling for me, as I had to see the surgeon last week. And so not great news. I'm still not fully walking yet, but we're getting there. So we're getting closer.
Progress
so thank
is
you
progress.
so much. Absolutely. So I just wanted to, tell me a little bit more about yourself. So in your bio, we talked a little bit about like kind of in general, but tell me a little bit more about you.
Well, I, like you had already mentioned, I am late diagnosed autistic and ADHD. And that had kind of started with, I was looking more into what it meant to be an HSP, highly sensitive person, which I need to give the backstory for that as well. I was actually supposed to be doing an interview with a woman who's an expert on HSP in children. And, we just got to talking and it was like, oh, okay, well, that's when I got more familiar with, I believe it's Dr. Elaine Aaron. She's the authority and go-to on all things highly sensitive person. So as I was looking more into that, it's like, oh, okay. That led me to sensory processing disorder, which has some overlap with HSP, but it's its own separate thing. And then that led to ADHD inattentive. So that's what I was self-diagnosing with that. And there was just part of me that was wondering, it's like, all right, it still feels like there's something else going on. So I scheduled my official evaluation, mostly just so if I ever needed to be on some type of medication, I would be able to access said medication. And I walked out of my evaluation with the ADHD inattentive confirmed, and with the bonus, as I like to call it, autism level 1. It's like, oh, okay. And then when I was bringing it up with my therapist, I said to her, it's like, well, they just diagnosed. After I got my other confirmation from a psychiatrist for the ADHD, he's like, well, he's when I was 14, I was diagnosed with clinical depression. Now, as an adult, I get diagnosed with ADHD and autism. And it's like, no one's diagnosed me with anxiety yet. And she's like, oh, well, I have. It's like, oh, great. So I have this whole...
Great, I get to add that to my list.
Right. So I have this whole gamut of things. And I'm sure there's other stuff going on. And just, again, from what I can glean off of the internet, still taking it with a whole grain of salt. Like, I don't want it to say, like, oh, I must have this because. It's like, okay, no, well, maybe that would make sense or it helps to explain certain things. But yeah, and then this was all, the beginning of this whole thing was coinciding with a lot of inner work that I was doing. You can call it shadow work, you can call it healing the inner child. It was a combination, I think, of the two, long time in the making, and something that I had been putting off just because I was like, I'm not quite ready to dive into all of this yet. But I was at a point where I was in the middle of, or right in the beginning of a divorce, and I just gotten my associate's degree, um, which I remember my mom had said to me. She's like, it's just like I told you, if you had just applied yourself. I'm like, I know, Mom, but I did it because I finished with like a 3.9 GPA. I got into
Yay.
the International Honor Society for junior colleges, and I had scholarships from all of the local four-year colleges. And I was like, I know, Mom, if I had just applied myself, I would have been able to do things. And it was all of this to say, it was just all of these things like that were just adding up and adding up. And talking to fellow late diagnosed women, we have all these shared experiences of this is what our childhood was like. Oh, that's what my childhood was like too. Or, it, in so many ways, it's been so liberating because it's helping me really understand, like, okay, so there wasn't just anything inherently wrong with me. It's just my brain was wired differently. And no wonder I was struggling because I wasn't, getting the support that I needed. And so,
And I
yeah,
sorry.
but being able to learn more about that has also helped me in turn be able to help me better support my autistic daughter. She just turned 21, so I know that as she gets older, she's going to face a lot of similar things.
So is she the one that you referred to as your mini me?
Oh, no, 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 no.
No, this is the other one.
My middle daughter is my 21-year-old. She's my non-speaking autistic, and the way I like to talk about her, not in a derogatory sense, it's just
Yeah.
that she's what you would consider autism level 3, and I'm autism level 1. So yes, we are both autistic, but in so many ways, the way we experience autism is completely different. But then there are other ways that are very similar.
Okay.
Like I've noticed she and I have some of the same stimming habits, some of the same sensory triggers. And what my mini me, she's the one that I'm really kind of keeping my eye on. It's like, well, if I went through these struggles as a child and her experiences as a child were very, very similar to mine, like, okay. Yes, it's just being very mindful about all that.
And I think that that really makes a huge difference in terms of being able to have that mindfulness and having that awareness, because then it gives you, like, first of all, gives you those ahas, right? So like later diagnosis gives you that, oh, that's what was happening.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why I do
Yeah.
that, right? So like those kinds of things makes a huge difference. And so I've never been officially diagnosed with ADHD, but my youngest son has.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that we were doing something, and then I don't remember what it was, but it was like a year ago or maybe a year and a half ago that he looked at me and he said, why do you think that? Because it was I did something. It's like, oh, I do that too. And he's like, where do you think that I get my ADHD from, Mom? And I'm like, what? He's like,
Well,
and he's
there
right, because like there are many things in terms of like if I were to be diagnosed, but it was like, okay,
well,
point
there's
taken.
also, research out there to support, especially on the ADHD side of it. It's very hereditary. So if a child has it, then there's always a 50-50 chance that one of the parents has it. And it's like, oh, well, that explains a lot, doesn't it?
Well, and we suspect that my dad had it as well, and so it was like, oh well, you got it from your grandfather, and he's like, yeah, you and your dad are a lot alike, and I'm like, okay then. I thought you and my dad were a lot alike, and he's like, yeah, but you too. so So how
Yeah.
has this helped you with in terms of being able, so I know that it's helped with being able to have that awareness where things are practical with your kids, with clients, but how has it helped you to have this late diagnosis?
I think in a lot of ways, it's helped me um, on a business sense, just in that, like, I know that I am and maybe other people are, but inherently I'm not cut out for a 9 to 5 job that's that repetitive, mundane, we'll call it crap, but that's how I look at it. It's repetitive, it's very mundane, and it just, the thought of it just kind of makes my skin crawl because how boring. And I'm sure, and I'm not trying to say that's wrong. For many people, it's what works for them. I know for me it doesn't. So it's like, yeah, it's allowing myself that. So I have the choice to be able to do this, or I have the choice to be able to do that. And it's finding what really works with my brain, what works with how I process things. And I found that, this online world of entrepreneurship especially has really allowed me to explore and to more fully take advantage. I know there's the whole sayings like, well, maybe autism is my superpower, maybe ADHD is my superpower. And that bothers me on a lot of levels, just because I don't always look at it as a superpower. It's like, okay, so there are some things that are great about it, but then there are other things that are just like completely debilitating. And trying to explain that to people, it's frustrating. So like I can't. It makes sense in my head. I know what it's like trying to explain time blindness to somebody. It can be rough, unless it's a fellow neurodivergent, because they're like, yeah, I get that. Yeah, see? But yeah, it's been that, and then, the own accommodations I think I've made for myself, being able to use those in ways that fully support me without having to further modify and adapt them for whatever working environment I'm in, has been beautiful. I'm a bit of a home person. I'm very much an introvert, so being able to do this, working from home, has been a blessing. And yeah, I think that's just, it's this whole culmination of really just being late diagnosed has helped me even further in my own self-awareness and my own picture of, okay, this is who I am. And I'm not just my diagnoses.
Yeah.
Those are just, they're there. It's not all of who I am.
And I think that that's really important. Like a really important point that you made is you are not your diagnosis, right? So a lot of times that's one of the things is like, oh, that person is autistic, or that person is ADHD, or that person is, and even going into diabetic or whatever. Like it's not just those things. And however, having ADHD and autism, all of those things are all invisible, right? So like, right? And so people can't see that that's what it is that's going on. People can't know what it is that's happening. So like you talked about, your therapist had said that you have anxiety. Like those things are completely debilitating. And I often hear, because I've worked with people for a long time, but I often hear people say, just get over it. You can't just get over it. I have anxiety. Like I can't just get over having anxiety. I have to figure out how to make it work. I need to figure out how to make it so that the challenges that I'm having are not debilitating, and how can I actually move forward, and so what are some of the tools that I can use? So how do you help your clients with being able to find the proper tools to be able to help them with once they know what it is that they have, or based on some of the symptoms or some of the behaviors that they are exhibiting?
It's mostly just starting with, I'll share what's worked for me, and with the whole caveat, of course, that what works for one individual isn't necessarily going to work for someone else. But to give them that base and some kind of foundation, and then to also provide them with ways to adapt and to put their own variation on it, or to develop completely different strategies. It really depends on individual need and individual situation, because it's another cliche, especially in the autism side of it. It's like you meet one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, and it's very true. Yes, we all share the diagnoses of being autistic, but we're all very different. And, you know, what works for my autistic daughter may not work for me. And similarly, what works for me may not work for her. But it's also come to the point where some of the things that I've put in place for her, I've been able to adapt for myself, and vice versa. Some of the things I have in place for myself, I can adapt for her. So that's the same approach that I take with my clients. And it's this whole, okay, well, here's what's worked for me. This is my strategy. This is my, my framework, however you want to put it. This is what I use. And here's how you can adapt it. Because I don't want you to think that I'm just going to hand you the answer and that overnight it's just going to work out. That's not how it works. And I want to set that expectation as well. It's like, I'm not here to magically fix all of your problems. I'm not a genie. I'm not, some kind of good luck fairy. I don't have a magic wand that I can just wave and poof, it's going to be fixed overnight. But what I can do is empower you to find answers within and to restore your own self-confidence, because once you are confident in yourself and you have confidence in the changes that you can make, you can do anything. And almost as cliche as that sounds, I found that to be incredibly true, is that once you have this unwavering belief in yourself, you're almost unstoppable.
And it really does. And I like that point that you made again is about that it's like a cliche, right? So it's like, yes, we've got all these different things that are going on. And yes, some of these things are similar, but it really is about being able to identify and figure out what it is that's going to work for you and how you're going to be able to adapt it. And like you said, and I love the fact that you actually say specifically that one strategy is adapted to be able to work and function for you, and vice versa for your daughter. And because it really does make that difference when we can actually learn to adapt whatever it is that was going on. And so my youngest, who had ADHD, that's one of the things that when he was younger, we would actually, my husband would say, okay, we're trying a new strategy again. Yes. Because what would happen is that he needed the change. So whatever it is that we were doing, like behavior charts or like sticker charts or whatever, it was always, we always needed to adapt and change whatever it was that was going on. And as he started getting older, it was always, he was included in the plan. How do we get things going? And same as like at school, it was like he was always included in the plan. And so even being in the school system, I'm going to suspect that in your school system, it would be relatively the same, is that the teachers just want to be able to have whatever, put in place whatever it is that they think is going to work. And so with my son is that we would actually bring him to the meetings, like from the time that he was, I think he was in grade 2, he was in grade 1 or grade 2, and we brought him to the meetings. And I would often get, well, he doesn't need to be here? Yeah, he does. He's the one that's in the classroom. And so when we're putting things in place for him, he needs to tell us whether or not that's going to work for him, because if it doesn't work for him, then we're setting everybody up for failure. You're going to have a disrupted class. You're going to have challenges. He's going to be in full-blown meltdown because he's still trying to emotionally regulate. Like there was lots of things that were going on that he needed to be part of that. And by the time that he reached high school, we set up his first meeting with the school for his special needs activities or special needs things. And he told the teachers, one teacher would suggest something and he'd say, yes, that'll work, or no, that won't work. And why and how. And so he led his own meeting by the time that he reached high school. And it was like, yes. And so he can advocate for himself and he can figure out what it is that he needs to do. And sometimes he still gets stuck, same as I do, same as everybody else does. But he still does. So for the most part, he's able to say, yeah, that'll work for me, or no, that won't work for me. Or he's able to point out things like, yeah, Mom, where do you think I got it from? Right.
Yeah.
So,
and that's wonderful. And Yeah, that's the thing too. It's like, especially in the United States, just in the States in general, with IEPs and the way that they work, it frustrates me to know how many parents aren't fully aware of the rights that they have under IDEA and at the
Yep.
IEP table, and how many parents just get railroaded at these meetings because it, and I don't blame teachers at all. I have a lot of sympathy for the teachers. They've done a lot of good, but if a parent isn't, equipped enough when they sit at the IEP table, it's just like this. You're going to sit there like a deer in the headlights, and you're just going to, it's not going to be any question. And if children, not just children, but if teenagers, if children are able to participate in their IEP meetings or in their planning meetings, they absolutely should be included in it because their voice matters, and it matters a lot.
Yeah, well, and one of the things is that when, like, so for example, when Case would actually get it, like he's 20, he's going to be 26 in just a few weeks, and so, but when he would be in the classroom or whatever it was that was going on, like we always had it set up so that he would go to the child and youth workers, and that was kind of like the standard. Like you're having difficulty, you're having trouble with whatever it is that's going on, you go into the child and youth workers room and you can be there, like that's your safe space. And so I think he was in grade 4 or 5, and there was a stigma attached to him going to the child and youth worker, right? So there was a stigma attached to like, oh, okay, well, there's got to be something wrong with him if he's going to the child and youth worker. And so he really struggled with being able to go to the child and youth worker. So we got to his IEP, like I said, he was grade 4 or 5, and so at that point he's like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to use that. That's not my safe space because I get teased because I go there. And it's like, okay, well, then that's not the solution. So where do you recommend? Because you need to go somewhere. So where do you recommend? It has to be somewhere that it's supervised. He said, I want to go to the principal's office because then he was in trouble and that made him more cool. Right. And I'm like, how does that make him more cool? But it made it so that that stigma was removed. And so that was his plan. And so he would go whenever, whatever it is that was going on and things were too hectic, and if the teacher would actually see, and he had like different cues that he would actually give the teacher, and the teacher would say go to the principal's office, and like it would be just so it's like, okay, so he's in trouble, he's going to the principal's office, but yet it wasn't because he was in trouble, it was because it was his safe place.
He needed a break.
And when we had and whenever he would have special like a replacement teacher, and so they would actually, when he was in younger grades, they would call me ahead of time because he didn't do well with transition and he didn't do well with not having his scheduled routine. So then I would call, or I would get a call from the teacher saying, okay, so-and-so's sick, unless it was a planned time. And then I would know ahead of time before that. But otherwise I would get a call in the morning. It would be, okay, then he's staying home today. And so we just didn't put him in a situation when he was younger that would actually create so much havoc. As he got older and he was able to transition a little easier, it was, he would go to his classroom, he would get his work, and he would go sit at the principal's office, and then he would work at the principal's office all day. But then he would still be able to participate in recess and gym and all those other things that he could function in the classroom with. But like his math and his English and all those other things, he was actually at the principal's office. So he didn't have to deal with those transitions. And again, it was his plan. It was his way of being able to come up with things. And it really made a huge difference to have him be able to be involved. And like I said, now at almost 26, he's now able to figure out, yeah, that's not going to work for me. And so like, even to this day, like you can't call him up and say, hey, I need some help to do this, or, hey, I need you to do that, because he doesn't do well with that transition. If you need him to help you, he'll be more than happy to come and help you, but you need to tell him that it's for tomorrow. It can't be today. Like it can't be drop what I'm doing to come and help you unless like there's a dire emergency. It has to be something tomorrow. Don't ask me to do it today. I can't do it. He just cannot shift into that. But yet he is an incredible worker. And so, and he prefers to do the rote stuff. He likes doing same things over and over again. Not me. I hate doing the same thing over and over again. But like, and like you said, like the differences between one person over the other. Like for you and your daughter, it's like those two different strategies, like what works for you doesn't necessarily work for somebody else. So like he likes to be able to have the exact time that he starts, the exact time that he finishes his recess, his lunch hour is at the same time, and so on and so forth. Whereas I like to be able to have that flexibility of being able to do things. And so if something happens like this morning where we were having tech issues, then I can say, okay, not a big deal. We've got some time. It's good. We can kind of adjust and we can figure out what it is that's going on. How does that work with you and your clients and your family?
I think that's the other thing, is that I have a predictable, flexible schedule, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
And I work in time blocks, and I work in, it's just having some, I like predictability in my routine, but I also like the flexibility in my routine. And that was, honestly, it was one of the biggest struggles for me, because before, having my routine thrown off would just derail my day. It would just throw everything off. It's like, no, I can't do anything else, because I have to get over the fact that the thing that was supposed to happen right now is not happening right now. It took me a while it was a big struggle. Even as an adult, like, just to have to get over the fact that something wasn't going as I had planned. Because I like to plan, and that's, partially, I think, my anxiety. I'm not trying to pinpoint this other thing. Like, I don't want to pinpoint it and say, like, oh, this is because I have anxiety. This is because I'm autistic. Whatever. It's just who I am. But yeah, having a predictable routine, or at least having some sense of predictability, that is my biggest must-have with my schedule. So I have things that are structured in such a way that, like, I have my working hours, and I schedule everything in blocks. It's okay, this is working time, this is leisure time, this is whatever. And then I have my list of activities that go into whatever block that I have on my schedule. And it works for me. For others, it may not work, because it may look like, oh, well, you have to schedule, leisure time. I'm like, yeah, I have to schedule my leisure time, because otherwise I'm not going to do it, because I'm just going to get stuck on something else. And it got to the point, actually, when I was just really starting out with all of this, I had reminders pop up on my phone. It's like, oh, well, you have to go eat lunch right now, or every so often go to the bathroom, or drink water. And it sounds almost so silly, but it's what I had to do to accommodate my brain and to accommodate my ability at any given moment, because I would just get so into something. It's the ADHD hyperfocus, that I wouldn't eat, that I wouldn't go to the bathroom, I wouldn't drink my water. I talked about it on an episode of my podcast. There was one time very early in the school year that I forgot to go pick my daughter up from school because it wasn't on my calendar and I didn't have a notification for it. And so even with that schedule, that predictable, flexible schedule, there's still kinks to work out. And it's just my own, okay, if I don't set aside the time at the beginning of the week, whether it's a Sunday or a Monday, to look at what's coming up and to then accommodate for that, I'm going to forget. And it's not because I mean to forget. It's not because I'm purposely forgetting. It's just how my brain is, and I'm going to forget.
Well, that's the same. Like I need to have it in my calendar. And I always say that if it's not in my calendar, it doesn't exist. Like, so
exactly.
If it's not there, if you want me to be at your place for 10 o'clock, then I need to make sure that I put it in that's my place at 10 o'clock. And then I also, because like we live in a rural community, so like there's like it's not within walking distance or whatever. Most of the time we have to drive to wherever it is that we're going. Well, I have to allocate time in my calendar that says I have to drive to Kori's house.
Yep.
Because, and then I have to drive home from Kori's house, because otherwise then it's like, oh crap, I'm supposed to be at Kori's house in like 2 minutes. I still need to drive 20 minutes. So I need to make sure that I put that in so that I know that it's there. And then it does make it so that, so like, I guess I do a lot of blocks, because then I do. So if I happen to be running a couple minutes late, then I know that it's not a big deal, because I've allowed.
You have buffer. Yeah.
Right. So like it's 15 minutes to get to town, but I put in 20 minutes or 30 minutes, or so that way there, if I'm like last minute need to go to the washroom or something happens that like I need to do whatever, then I know that I've got that little bit of flexibility so that I'm still not running late and still doing the things. And so that is how I've learned to accommodate myself over the last few years, because that was one of the things that I struggled with, is that I worked the 9-to-5 job, and my last physical job that I worked is that I got fired because I didn't allocate enough time for me to be able to do my notes. I would see all my clients, I would do all the things that I needed to, but I didn't have time. I didn't put down to make sure that I was actually doing my notes, or that I had some buffer time, so that if I was 10 minutes longer with my client, that then I would run out of time, because then I'd have to go and see my next client and that kind of thing. And so like it made a huge difference. And so in my own practice, that's one of the things that I do, is that I have enough time that I can put that in between and make sure that I have that flexibility. Because otherwise, so like my appointment scheduler is the same thing. So if you book an appointment with me, you can't book an appointment with me if there's 15 minutes, if there's not 15 minutes ahead, because I've got that buffer in there, so that if I need to, I have that, because it used to be that it was like back to back to back to back to back. And it's like, okay, I don't even have time to go pee.
Right? Yeah, I don't have time to go take a break. I need to.
Right.
I do the same thing. And with my calendar, it's mostly digital. But if it's something like super important, then it actually gets physically written down on a calendar, and I put it on a sticky note, and that sticky note gets moved around on my desk so that it's always visible and in my face.
Because it really does make that difference.
It does. It makes a huge difference.
I like the fact that you've actually talked about like all these different ways of being able to accommodate it. And it's not this big, huge negative thing that we have going on. It's just a matter of us figuring out how to be able to adapt, right? So how do we adapt? How do we make it work? How do we make things happen so that it can be functional for us? And so if you are the 9-to-5 kind of person who needs the breaks at the same time, then that's perfect. But if you're not, then being able to have some tools that allow you to be able to have that part. But if you are the 9-to-5, what are some of the strategies that you can put in place that if your schedule does get disrupted, how do you reschedule? Like, how do you readjust? How do you, so that it doesn't ruin your entire,
how do you reset? And
right. So I love that. Reset.
I've talked about this in my podcast, but I had every year at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year, I get caught up in the fact that, I'm going to use a happy planner this year. Or I'm going to use a bullet journal. I'm going to use this system or that system, because there's all the hype around it. And then what I end up with is just a stack of unused planners and a drawer full of planner stickers that never get used. I like planner stickers. They're very pretty. I find other uses for them. But my problem with them, and especially with a traditional planner, is on their time blocks. They have, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, all the way through. And if I put something in my schedule at that time and it goes over that time, or I can't get it done within that time, I freak out, because the planner told me that I have to do it in this time. So I have to do it in this time.
Yeah.
It's too stressful. And I was trying to explain that to somebody, and they're like, well, you can just, no, my brain tells me that it's in this time. It has to get done in this time.
And now I've failed, right? And now I failed.
Yeah, and now I failed.
Right. So like it's all these different things that people don't necessarily, and especially if you've got that flexibility and you don't have some of these challenges, then it's like, oh yeah, that's easy. That's not a big deal. And so like same as like me doing circles and stuff, right? So like if I'm hosting a circle, it's like we need to be doing like this kind of thing. I've had to modify how I do that, because it's like, okay, so I've got these things and I've always got buffers, right? So it's like, we're going to work on this, but if something happens, then I can kind of go with the flow, because it's important to go with the flow in what it is that I do. But at the same time, it's like, okay, but we still need to cover all of our material. We still need to do all the things, right? So like I hosted a retreat back in April, and the people that I worked with, they were just kind of like all over the place. And I'm like, okay, we're not going to be able to cover, and we were working on chakras. We're not going to be able to cover all the chakras. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, how am I going to do this? Like, you guys paid to do this retreat, and we were supposed to balance our chakras. How are we supposed to balance our chakras if we can't even get the material covered? So it was like, okay, Rollie, just reframe, figure out how it is that you're going to do this.
Take a step back.
Figure out how this is going to happen. And then the feedback from the clients was like, okay, but we're okay with whatever. So then it made things a little easier. And so we didn't get all the chakras covered, but we got the main ones. And well, not main ones, they're all important, but we were able to focus on the most practical ones that they needed at that time. So it was like, okay, so I can do this. So, but it was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And I'm like, okay, this isn't working.
That's one of the biggest things that I've learned for myself, and not just in everyday situations, but especially for parenting, is to be able to take that step back and to look. And it's like, okay, it's not the end of the world. Your worst case scenario is not going to happen. It's okay. How do you readjust? How do you reset and still have it fit within these, parameters? Where's the win, I guess, or silver lining? Where is the good in this? And how can you build on that good instead of dwelling on the negative? Because that was my tendency. I would always dwell on the, oh my goodness, it all went to crap. No, I can't. It can't be salvaged. When in actuality, yeah, it can.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can. What are you talking about?
Right. And it does. It makes that difference. It's like, once we can actually figure out how to be able to navigate. And sometimes it's that taking a step back. So when you're working with somebody else, is being able to, like, and I don't mean working, I mean like kind of being around family, friends, whatever, and you can see that somebody's getting agitated. Instead of judging them, maybe take a step back and figure out, okay, well, what is it that's happening for them?
Yep.
And telling them to relax, or at least for me, if you tell me to relax, I'm going to punch you in the nose. Like, that's not going to help me.
For
right?
me,
That's going to make me more angry.
Yeah. I mean, if I see someone in that kind of situation where it looks like they're on edge for whatever reason or another, it's mostly just taking the time to acknowledge, asking them if they're okay. And if further telling them, and it's okay if you're not okay. I'm just asking. I'm not trying to pry. You don't have to tell me anything. I'm just, genuinely concerned. And if the person wants to go further, okay, fine. Let's just take a moment. Let's talk. See if it, helps. And if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine too. I'm not going to press the issue and force it, because I've been in those situations where people just keep pressing the issue, and it just makes me that much more uncomfortable, and I'm going to shut down that much further. The more you press me to talk about something when I'm not ready to talk about it, the further I'm going to shut down. So,
yeah. And that's not helpful either, right? So again, it's about being able to, like, the people that you're around is finding out, like, how can you, and what can you do, and how can you kind of to navigate whatever it is that's happening. And so,
yeah.
So is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you think that it would be really important for our audience to listen to know?
Gosh. I think if there was ever anything else that I would want people to take away, and it's something that I talk about with my own clients, it's my own method, and it's the rise above. And it's not just, being able to rise above the crap. This is what it stands for. It's recognizing, inviting, sitting, embracing, acknowledging, belonging, observing, validating, and then emancipating. So it's when you're feeling angry at a situation, and maybe just anger is that top thing that you feel, but there's other things underneath the surface, you can at least pick out that one reaction that you're having. You're going to recognize it, you're going to invite it, you're going to sit with it and embrace it. You're going to acknowledge that it's happening, that there's nothing wrong with you for this happening. And maybe take a moment to figure out why. Okay, so why is the situation making me feel this way? You're going to validate it, because I think that's another problem too, is that when people are upset or either frustrated or there's just this anger about it, it's like people are like, oh, well, just relax or get over it. It's like, no, I don't want to relax and get over it. I want to be angry about it, and I have every right to be angry about it. Let me be angry about it for a minute or however long I need to be angry about it, and then I won't be angry about it because I didn't have to relax. I didn't have to get over it. Yeah. I let it ride. And I mean, that's just it. It's that you are acknowledging that it's there, and then you're going to release it when you're ready to release it.
And I think that's really important, right?
Yeah, because instead of bottling it up.
And that's one of the things that I tell my clients all the time, just feel the emotion, right? So we have been trained and learned how to just shut it down. It's like, stop shutting it down. Allow yourself to feel that emotion. If you're feeling angry or sad or hurt, then feel it.
There's a reason.
Yeah.
There's a reason why you're feeling this way, and let yourself feel it.
Exactly. And so it makes a huge difference.
And it's worth those few moments of being uncomfortable with whatever emotion it is that you're feeling, then moments later exploding at something that's completely unrelated because you didn't deal with the other emotions. And they talk about, it's like the one straw that breaks the camel's back. That one straw is usually not related at all to the situation that breaks your back, because you have not dealt with all these unaddressed things. And if you're not dealing with the unaddressed things, it really is. It's going to be one small thing. It's going to send you over the edge.
And it really is that small thing that goes, takes to the other side, right? So, so we live with my mother-in-law, and everybody tiptoes around her, and that's not the way that I handle things. That's not the way that I deal with it. If we have to address it, let's address it. Mm-hmm. But everybody else around her tiptoes, and I'm like, okay, this isn't working for me. This isn't working for me. And there was something big that was going on, and it was like, we all need to know what it is that's happening, but let's just ignore it. Let's just pretend it didn't happen. And I'm like, I'm not okay with this. Mm-hmm. I'm not okay with this. And so that day it was made me super angry, and I was really having a hard time. And so then the next day I said to my husband, I'm not ignoring it. You guys want to ignore it. You guys want to pretend it's not happening. I'm not pretending it's not happening. And we had that full conversation. It's and it wasn't a very pretty conversation, but it was a conversation that we needed to have. Call a spade a spade. Stop playing it. I don't mean being nasty or being mean, but it's I can't do the tiptoe. It just doesn't work. Right? We can't address the issues if everybody just brushes it under the rug. And so then we don't get to feel our emotions because we're trying to make sure that everything's okay. And it's it's not okay. Right? So really important for us to do that as well. So, so I love that. So how do people get a hold of you? So I know that in the description, I've got the links and that kind of thing, but is there a specific way that they need to get a hold of you to be able to schedule something? Or
that's really the main way, which I believe now the website is going to be pointed to my main domain. I've actually done a little bit of rebranding since I originally had sent over my links to you, and I apologize for not updating that. But it should be redirecting over to my main domain, which is koryathome.com.
Kori at home?
Kori, I can pop them in comments if you'd like.
That would be perfect.
Okay. I can send them over to you or through email, whichever works.
Yeah, so just send them, and then we can actually get them updated. So that way there, I'll ask Sahara to be able to update everything for us. So, and then when she does the podcast, that she'll be able to do that and make sure the correct ones are there as well. So I loved having this conversation with you. This was great. And I think that this was much needed conversation, because I think that we do not talk about it enough.
Yep.
And so it's just kind of like brushed under the rug. So like, even if you're not the person who has any challenges that way, you know somebody who does. And so being able to have that opportunity to be able to know what it is that's going on and how to be able to do that is, and being able to understand from that perspective is always really helpful as well.
And I think the other part of it too is that you never know what adult in your life is dealing with this kind of stuff. Yeah. And it makes you think, and I think it just makes you stop for a moment. And at least for me, it's really just given me another sense of awareness of not just myself, but just like people in general. So.
Yep. Makes a huge difference. So thank you so much, Kori, for having this conversation, and would love to be able to chat some more. And because I think, like I said, I think this is a much needed conversation that we need to continue to have. So I would love to connect again. And
absolutely.
For those of you who are listening, please reach out to Kori, and thanks everybody for listening. Talk to you guys soon. Bye for now.